Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris and I'm a surgical service registrar in paediatric surgery. And today I wanted to talk to you about the GAMSAT and specifically how you can prepare best for Section 2. So when I sat the GAMSAT, I came from a humanities background. I'd been doing an undergraduate degree in languages and Middle Eastern studies. And so this was the part of the exam that I felt fairly comfortable with because it was similar to what I've been doing before. And when I got my results, this was the section that I scored best in. I scored in the top 1%. And I did that by applying the same principles that I'd learned in my humanities undergraduate to the exam that I was sitting for entrance into medical school. And so what I wanted to talk through today was the approach that I used in really tangible, step-by-step ways to get from a position of having nothing on the page to an essay that was scoring very highly. Section 2 of the GAMSAT is fairly simple in its structure. The idea is that they provide you with a quote or a series of quotes, and then you need to provide a written response to those quotes. And it's separated into two separate parts, Task A and Task B. In Task A, the quotes generally relate to broader concepts, social, political, cultural. And then in Task B, the quotes tend to relate more to introspective or individual issues that might have a broader context to them but are more individualized. Then there's the time constraint. You have 60 minutes to respond to both of these tasks, in addition to the 5 minutes of reading time that they give you at the beginning. So in reality what that means is you have 5 minutes to orientate yourself to the nature of the section. Then you have 30 minutes to complete each one of the responses. And usually that means 5 minutes of planning time, 25 minutes of writing time. And for most of the quotes that you're going to get, and for most of the concepts that you're going to have to deal with, the best way to structure your response, and certainly the easiest way to practice your responses, is to use an argumentative essay style of response. Now, there are a number of different reasons why the argumentative essay as a structure lends itself to scoring well on the GAMSAT. If you look at the marking criteria that is provided, and there's not a lot of depth, but there is some, the marking criteria focuses on two key things. One is the quality of what is said, and the second thing is the quality of the structure that's used to say it. And an argumentative essay fits both of these categories really quite well. If you structure it in the correct way, then the organization of your thoughts is very clear. And if your thoughts are linked to the thesis or the topic, then your depth of response tends to communicate a quality of answer that you won't necessarily get in other forms of writing quite so easily, particularly in the time frame that you need to do it in. If you're going to use an essay structure, it can be tempting to try and memorize an essay before you get into the room and then Frankenstein it in such a way as it fits with whichever quotes that you're provided. But I want to caution you against doing that. One, it doesn't show a very sophisticated answer because invariably the essay that you're memorizing isn't relevant to the quote that you're actually trying to answer or is only passingly relevant. But second of all, it doesn't allow you to be flexible and creative with the responses that you're giving. And as a consequence, it puts a cap really on how well you can score with regards to the quality of your answer and the quality of your structure. In contrast, if you memorize a structure that you can then equally deploy against any quote that you might be given, it gives you the flexibility to be creative with the subject matter, to choose the quotes that you know the most about or are most relevant to your experience, and also it allows you to take out things as necessary according to the time constraints and input things if you have a little bit of extra time that is going to fit within the narrative that you're trying to provide. So what I want to do now is step you through the structure that I use and that I memorized in order to try and give myself a scaffold to work from when I was responding to the quotes that were provided within the GAMSAT as stimulus for each of the tasks. So the overarching structure is an introduction, 2 paragraphs, and a conclusion. Anything more than 2 paragraphs is difficult to fit within a 25-minute writing window. Not impossible to do 3, but I think 2 is probably enough if it's well constructed. And we're going to have 9 pieces of information that we're going to generate as a part of our initial plan that's going to fit into that structure to fill out the detail of the essay. So what I'm going to do is break down this structure into points. And each one of the points that I list for the introduction, the paragraphs, and for the conclusion is going to represent 1 to 2 sentences that you're going to generate based on the stimulus that you're given. So let's start with the introduction. The first point is going to be providing a contextual statement. So that is providing some background to the context of the stimulus or the quote that you're dealing with. The second point is to provide an outline of the stimulus, so in broad terms describing the quote or what the quote means. The third point is going to be your position on the stimulus, that is your thesis. And the fourth point is going to be a summary of the 2 arguments that you're going to make in support of your position regarding the stimulus material. So now let's have a look at the paragraph structure. Each one of your paragraphs is going to represent one of the arguments that you've formulated at the beginning of your process. So there's 2 paragraphs, there'll be 2 arguments. So the first point is to state your argument. What is it that you believe proves that you're correct about your conclusion regarding the stimulus that you've been provided? Then your second point is going to be to extrapolate on that in a detailed way, so to add some context to your argument. The third point is to create an example in real life or in theory that relates to why you're correct in stating your argument. And then what you need to do is provide a counterpoint, which is your fourth point. So a counter-argument that in theory refutes your position. Your fifth point is to try and give an example that supports the counter-argument. And then your sixth point is to provide a reason why the counter-argument is incorrect in the context of your position, or somehow misguided with relation to your position. And then the seventh point, or the final point in the paragraph, is to link your argument, now reinforced by refuting the counterpoint, to the overall thesis that you've decided to pursue. So just to break that down into slightly simpler terms, what you've done is you've made an argument in support of your overall position. You've then simulated somebody disagreeing with you, and then you've provided an answer to that disagreement which strengthens your original position. And then you've linked it back to your overall thesis. So in this way, you've shown that you can respond to the topic, you've shown a depth of consideration by considering what someone might say who disagrees with you, and then you've linked it back to the overall structure of the thesis that you're trying to put forward with your essay. So once you've gone through the process of formulating your two paragraphs, the conclusion is fairly straightforward. There's going to be 2 points here. The first is going to be summarising the arguments that you've made in your paragraphs, and the second is going to be providing a link back to your overall thesis or position. The beauty of this structure is that it creates a natural organisation to your thoughts. You're challenging your own position and emerging victorious from that challenge, and so you're showing a consideration of depth of response, and then you're also showing that you have a response that is resilient to refutation. And in that way, you're showing that you have a quality answer and that you've organised your thoughts in a quality way as well. It also gives you natural deliverables that you need to think about in the planning stage of your process. So when you have that 5 minutes out of the 30 minutes per essay that you're planning, you're not just thinking in random terms, but you're thinking about how am I going to fill this structure. So specifically what you need is an answer to the overall stimulus, so your thesis, 2 arguments, 2 counter-arguments, and examples for each of those things. So all you need is 9 bits of information in your head at the beginning of the process to have a completely organised essay ready to write in that 25-minute period. So now you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I have a structure to work with and that's helpful, but it doesn't change the fact that when I get the quotes, I don't really know what to draw out of them or how to respond to them because they seem so archaic or so removed from my experience, particularly if you've been working in scientific areas for 3 or 4 years before you're sitting the GAMSAT, as opposed to working or doing humanities work. And what I would say to you is that just remember that in the humanities, the topics or the themes that they're drawing upon are not ancient topics and themes alone. They relate equally to the context of today and to today's examples as they do to examples or context from many hundreds or thousands of years ago. If you're talking about democracy and about the pros and cons of democracy, you can equally find examples in the political structures of today as you can in the political structure of ancient Athens. If you're talking about power and privilege, you can equally provide an essay response based on examples from Hollywood and how power and privilege relates to fame and celebrity, as you can to how power and privilege relates to the construction and fall of the Roman Empire. All of these things are universal human themes and experiences. And so when you're drawing upon the quotes and you're trying to formulate a response to the quotes, just remember that your context and experience is just as valid as an older concept or experience. And so draw upon your own reservoir to try and give yourself answers to these questions and then input that into the structure, and you can still create an extremely good essay just based on a modern context. Having said that, having a basic understanding of some of the main traditions and cultural phenomena that have developed over the last couple of centuries can be really, really helpful. But that's a really intimidating thing to try and get your head completely around, right? So what I would recommend doing is using practice questions as a stepping off point. Take practice quotes from quote generators that deal specifically with topics from the GAMSAT and apply this structure to them. And if you feel like you can't generate examples to make arguments, then go and have a look into these topics and see whether or not you can research a couple of things that is going to give you the basics to formulate a response. And if you do that consistently over time, what you'll find is that you'll build up a repository of knowledge that's going to be usable, not just in the context of your general knowledge, but is going to be targeted towards the structure that you're going to be using in the GAMSAT. And so it's much more high yield practice than just reading random things or watching random videos. This links back to my final point, which is that you need to practice this section. I know that it can seem like the one thing that you want to sort of leave because it's hard to figure out how to practice it effectively, and the third section of the GAMSAT is weighted so much more than the other two sections. But I would encourage you to at least every week go through the process of writing a couple of essays relevant to the themes that are going to come up in the GAMSAT. And there's a few reasons for this. One is just physically getting used to writing in 25 minutes an essay response is not something that we're necessarily used to these days, and so getting used to having your hand cramping or working through that is actually quite helpful. The second thing is that it helps you to organize your thoughts. So if you're consistently reproducing this structure and thinking about quotes in this way, it becomes intuitive. And when you get the quotes on the day, you're going to be much faster in planning your response and thinking about your response than you would otherwise be. And if you do enough practice essays, then invariably you're going to cover topics that are, if not the same, very similar to the ones that are going to come on the actual GAMSAT. And so if that's the case, and you've already gone through the process of synthesizing the structure and the information, it's going to be really easy to roll that out. And it just takes away a lot of the cognitive burden of the exam day when you can feel comfortable deploying the structure, perhaps even in a way that you've done before, and taking that stress out of the experience so you can focus on other areas of the exam. Alright guys, thank you for watching. If you haven't already, then hit like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. And until next time, enjoy the work.